Welcome back, guys, and today I wanted to do something a bit different. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, you would probably recognize that throughout this past year or so, I have been making a conscious effort to watch as many classic films as I can get my hands on. These are movies that are pre-1980. But for many years now, there's always been one movie that has constantly eluded me, one film that I have been waiting for the perfect opportunity to watch, and I think I found that perfect opportunity considering this past week. This film reached its 50th anniversary. Of course, I'm talking about Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. But instead of me just giving my immediate reaction to the film, I thought it'd be more interesting for you guys to see a discussion about this movie and a discussion on how this film has impacted pop culture as we know it. So to help me, I'm bringing on author and YouTube film critic with over 1 million subscribers, a bona fide movie nerd and an all-around swell guy, Mr. Chris Stuckmann. How you doing today, Chris?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. This is a really cool film to be talking about.
Yeah, as I said, this is a movie that has been on my watch list for several years now. I kind of did something similar when I watched Schindler's List, is I just wanted to watch this film when I was ready for it. I didn't want to just watch it because I had the time to. I didn't want to just pop in this movie. I wanted it to really engross me and really to take up all of my attention.
Yeah, I totally get that. I have, it's oftentimes a discussion with the wife. She's like, oh, I'm just going to, maybe I'll play some music and we'll watch a movie. And I'm like, what movie? And it's like some serious movie. And I'm like, I think I might just want to like sit directly in the center of the room with the lights off and have no other sounds happening while I watch this film. And then it's like this discussion where she's like, are you really going to be that guy? And I'm like, yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I totally get that, especially when you have a movie like 2001 that is a film that has completely molded a genre. What was your first encounter with 2001 A Space Odyssey?
Well, let's see. I was a teenager, and I think it was actually the year 2001. And it may have been because it was the year 2001, and I was like, I'm finally going to watch this movie. And I remember I rented it from Blockbuster, and it was on VHS, and we had this little 13-inch tube TV in my room. That's the TV I had that I would play games on or watch, whatever on. Like we got access cable, I think, through one of those bunny ear antennas. And I remember popping it in and being taken by the visuals, but for the most part being totally bored and just not understanding it, not getting it, not appreciating it really at all, especially like the 10-minute Stargate sequence. I remember thinking, what the hell am I looking at? And that was my first experience with it. Over the years, though, I kept thinking about it, and it wouldn't like escape my brain. And it felt like once a year for the next few years of my life, inexplicably, I just felt like watching it again. Even though when I was 13, I was like, I don't like this. It's not good. I don't get it. For whatever reason, I just kept wanting to see it. And eventually, I really, really started to appreciate it. And now it's one of my favorite sci-fi films.
Yeah, this is a film that I'm actually glad that we didn't do this discussion like the day after I watched this film. This is a movie that the more I thought about it, the more I really liked it. I described this movie as kind of a virus that has hijacked my mind, that I just can't stop thinking about this film. This is a movie that really commands your attention, and even the days following it, even if you're not really into the film and you don't really fully understand it, this is a film that will constantly just sit with you and fester in your mind.
No, you're totally right. It's completely hypnotic. This is like, I rewatched it like 2 days ago. This film is the closest I have ever felt to actually being hypnotized. For most, like so many sequences, a lot of it has to do with the sound design, but especially the Stargate sequence. It just kind of pins me to my seat. The editing is so perfect. The shots are purposefully almost entirely symmetrical, which you would think would get boring after a while, having most everything look perfect like that, but it doesn't. And without a doubt, there's just something completely hypnotic about the film that just makes me every single time I watch it, I glean something new. I learn something new about it. I've researched the film for years. When I was 13 and I first saw it, there weren't as many like forums and analysis things where you could like really research it back then. You could find some stuff like on GeoCities or whatever, which was one of the oldest like free website generators on the internet. It was Yahoo GeoCities. You'd find some really terribly designed websites every once in a while where people were just like had these walls of text talking about a film that they loved, and it was tough to really engage with other film fans about it like you can today. And so I feel like I wasn't exposed to the right type of discussion back then to really start to appreciate the movie, nor was I really mature enough to really grasp it, I think. But over the years, each time I watch it, and I've always taken something from it. And like you said, it kind of sticks in your head like a virus.
I think that there was a quote when Darren Aronofsky's film Mother was making its rounds in the theater and people were really theorizing about what that film meant. I think there was a quote that came out, and I'm paraphrasing, that it had said something along the lines of, if you have to Google the ending of a movie to get some type of affirmation about how you feel about a film, then that movie failed. And I feel like it's movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey that kind of confirm that. I think that statement is kind of asinine, and it's just flat out wrong, because this is a movie that came out 50 years ago and people are still having a discussion on it. We're doing it right now. Do you think that if you have to go onto the internet and talk to a community of people and have this sort of validity that you find on the internet, do you think that a film fails because of that?
No, I feel like the reason I like to look up films like this, or for instance Mother, is not necessarily because of confusion, but just because I enjoy being part of the conversation. I enjoy seeing how other people react to something, or what other people have taken away for something. It's the same reason why people gather and look at an art piece at a museum, and then they say, "What do you think of this?" And another person says, "Yeah, well, this is what I see in this art piece," and someone else might have a different opinion. It's just people who like art talking about art. If someone watches a film like 2001 and from beginning to end just doesn't grasp it, that's fine. I didn't grasp it when I was 13. It doesn't mean the film failed. It doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that maybe either you just didn't like it, or maybe you weren't quite ready for it like I was when I was 13. So no, I don't really think that that's... I understand what he was saying. Like, I can kind of understand what he meant, but I think it might have been worded improperly, because I Google movies all the time, like, what are people saying about this? Because I like being part of the conversation.
And I think that this is the type of film, and a lot of Kubrick's movies are like this. A movie recently that did this, Annihilation. It's a film that when you see it and the more you unpack it, at least for myself personally, I started to enjoy it more, starting to pick out all the little intricacies of the film. Now, Kubrick has even said himself that to not necessarily worry about the what in the film, but worry about how it makes you feel. And that's the important thing about a film, is how it impacts yourself personally. And I feel like this is a film that when I look at this movie, I might not be able to tell you exactly what every single shot in this movie means, but I can tell you how it makes me feel. And I totally agree. This is a very mesmerizing, very hypnotic movie. The first 3 minutes of this film is no picture at all. It's just this music, and I just found it completely engrossing. And do you think that Stanley Kubrick is trying to attach a certain meaning with this film, or do you think that it's more of a feeling?
Well, that's a great question, and I think one of the reasons he and Arthur C. Clarke, the author of The Sentinel, who co-wrote the script with Kubrick, I feel like they were both trying to go for a little bit of ambiguity, especially with the end. There are specific images that are very clear and that definitely are going for a certain type of gut reaction. But I think in general, he wanted people to take away what they felt personally while watching it. And for me, I've always viewed the film as an allegory for how we like to meddle in things as people, and how it can be dangerous. We open with the prehistoric man, and he discovers the use of a tool, which he immediately turns into a weapon in the next scene by killing another ape with it. and then he throws it up in the air, and we get that incredible jump cut that people have talked about for years, where we cut to now these ships in space. And we have jumped forward so far, and men are, and women as depicted, are still using tools improperly. The first ship that we see, there's been debate about this for years, about whether or not this is a spaceship or it is a nuclear satellite. People involved with the film have been quoted in interviews as saying that it was supposed to be a nuclear satellite. Kubrick refused to ever answer this. If that is a nuclear satellite, then we are cutting from man's first ever primitive weapon to man's most advanced weapon, which is a really mind-boggling cut. And we're now seeing people in space drinking food through a straw like a baby, learning how to walk in space. So we have cut from prehistoric humankind, and they are learning how to walk on two legs, learning how to use weapons.
Also, to just how to use the bathroom again. There's a shot in this film where a character is reading a list of instructions on how to use this toilet in space. And again, I think that that's another allusion that Kubrick is inserting into this film, that when we're in space, we are no longer the most dangerous thing out there. Just being in the element of space is more dangerous than just us meager men.
Yeah, Kubrick seemed very interested in the examination of what we as humans do when we're faced with a new environment or habitat. Like after the Jupiter mission, and he goes through the Stargate, and now he's in this strange room, and there's the monolith, and we watch him age, and then he becomes the Star Child. He's very interested in showing the progression of evolution to the point where people are learning how to somehow survive in a new environment, and space being the final one that we're showing people learning how to survive. So it's just fascinating. It's honestly fascinating. You can watch the film as a visual spectacle, or you can start really digging deep. And there's so many different. There's people who believe it's about the search for God. Kubrick himself has even described the monolith and mankind's searching for it as the search for God. I'm sure you've probably read this or have heard about it, but that famous painting of Adam reaching out with his finger and then God reaching out with the finger. At the end of the film, when the monolith is standing before Bowman's bed, he sort of reaches out to it with that look, with that finger like that, like he's reaching out to God or trying to find God. And so there's people who can really find religious symbolisms, as well as the allegory for not meddling with weaponry and things like and nature. It's a stunning movie. It's a stunning movie. Yeah. And you can watch it and be like, man, that was kind of boring, like from an entertainment perspective. But I feel like there's just so much more to it than that.
Right, and I think that the legacy that this film has is the fact that multiple different people can watch this film and derive something different from it. As you've said, you can have a list of theories and they can all mean something different. And I don't think that Kubrick is wanting us to say this exact shot means this. I don't think that that's what his intentions were with this film. And I think it's more towards the end of this film. I think a lot of people mostly agree on the first and second act of this film. And I think that towards the third act, when you start to get the White Room and the Stargate, that people start to really have some creative theories. And I think what Kubrick is trying to do is he's trying to propose this question to mankind. I think you also have to keep in mind the context, the historical context surrounding this movie. We were just about to put a man on the moon. This is the space race. I think that Kubrick is proposing a question to the audience of what the next step for mankind is. I think that that's what the baby and the star child of this film represents, is this sort of rebirth. What our next course of action is going to be. Are we going to be scared and timid of space like the early man was with the monolith? Or are we going to be arrogant like the modern day man was when he was just practically taking selfies in front of the monolith? What is our next course of action going to be as a species, as mankind?
Yeah, no, that's a great way of looking at it, and I feel the same way. It's interesting. The film starts with a view of like ancient early life, and it ends with brand new life. So it's a great bookend, where you get to see like the journey that Kubrick's vision of what could possibly, and that's the other thing. Surprisingly accurate in a lot of ways. There's obviously things that haven't occurred, and we haven't been to Jupiter, we haven't been to Mars on foot. So, but like, it's just interesting how much of it feels scientifically plausible. Mm-hmm. There's little spices and seasonings of movie stuff, but for the most part, none of it, even today, 50 years later, still seems like, yeah, that's a viable idea of some things that could happen. That's another thing. Holy God, the special effects still hold up.
They're absolutely mind-blowing. The special effects in this film and the work that Kubrick was able to put into this movie, it's nothing short of jaw-dropping. It kind of just hits you like a brick wall, especially when you watch films that came around the time that this movie was released. I mean, Star Wars wasn't released for another 10 years, and the amount of work that Kubrick was able to do with this film, with the special effects, it's nothing short of astonishing. The footprint that this movie has left on future science fiction films, the shot of the man running throughout the space station as it spins, that's in so many other science fiction films nowadays. The opening shot of the space ship that is it's this long panning shot of, I don't know what the ship is called, but that is almost a carbon copy of the opening shot of the Star Destroyer in Star Wars. The impact that this film has made on the genre and the impact that this film has had on other science fiction films, it's immeasurable.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like I said, I rewatched it 2 days ago, and I had my nitpick hat on, and I was like, I'm gonna find a shot that looks bad. Damn it, there's not. And it just makes you mad. Sometimes I see movies that are so good, it actually makes me mad. I'm like, what? Why? How did you do that stuff? There's effects to. I mean, I know how he did the guy running around in the circle. It was basically, from what I understand, the set was designed to rotate, so he was technically always on the bottom, and they had a stationary camera, kind of like what Nolan did with the hallway in Inception. He had a stationary camera rotating, but you can't tell when you watch it. It just seems completely seamless, and I can't even imagine what audience members were thinking in 1960. I know a lot of people walked out and they didn't quite enjoy it, but for those who really got it, like for instance Ebert, who loved it from the get-go and was one of the first critics to really stand by it, I can't imagine what he was thinking when some of these technical shots were happening, because again, this, like, as you said, is before Star Wars, and sure, Star Wars kind of took what this started and went in different directions with it, but it's just absolutely astonishing still as a technical masterpiece.
Well, another element of this movie that I wanted to talk about is not just the visual effects, but some of the sound design of this film and the score of this movie. The amount of prowess that the people involved with all of that are able to put on display. Again, it's very hypnotic. It's very mesmerizing. That aspect of this film is really able to bring it up a notch, and it is able to elevate this film to a level that I don't think would have been reached without it.
Absolutely. Richard Strauss and his original composition, which I'm probably about to butcher, also Sprach Zarathustra or something like that, is the famous song that's been parodied countless times. And it's similar to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's a sequence that has received so much parodying that you know exactly what's being parodied, even if you've never seen the original film. That's how famous it is. And rewatching it, I still got goosebumps when the ape is just like staring at the bones, and he gets that quick little insert of the monolith, and then you hear the song start, and you're like, that guy, that thing is figuring shit out right now. And I've seen the movie a million times, and I always think that because it's just so impactful. And the use of like classical themes throughout is something that I've always kind of wanted to do if I ever got to make a feature. Was I love the idea of knowing exactly what your score will be before you're even shooting. I've made a few short films and worked with a great composer who I'm going to continue to work with, and he's amazing. But there is definitely a very helpful aspect to knowing exactly how a song is going to weave through your film before you even start it. So, yeah, I feel like the movie would still be great, but that score just takes it to another level.
Well, you and I were talking about other science fiction films that were released in the similar time that 2001: A Space Odyssey was released. And what do you think it is about not only this movie, but Stanley Kubrick's entire filmography, like movies like The Shining that have spawned entire documentaries? What do you think it is about this film in particular that has spawned this conversation that we can still have 50 years later?
Well, if we push the technical mastery aside and how good he was at directing, I feel like a lot of it has to do with the fact that most all of his films in some way tap into the awe of humanity while also exploring either our darkest depths of humanity, like with The Shining, a domestic dispute taken through supernatural lens. In the case of 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's, humanity's evolution and our future. And he is brave enough to be ambiguous about it while planting enough seeds to start a discussion, while also not giving away details in interviews all the way until his grave. So he's sort of like the ultimate unsolved mystery. I don't know if you ever watched that show. It used to be on TV, Unsolved Mysteries, where it would be like this host talking about these murders that were never solved and how they've haunted case investigators for years. I've always kind of viewed Stanley Kubrick as the unsolved mystery of directors because he has made so many thought-provoking movies that, as you said earlier, don't necessarily have one hard truth about them. When The Shining ends and you see that photograph, you can take that and come up with 10 other ideas that branch off into something, but it's not like you can just grasp one hard truth about it. It just sends chills down your body. And he was the ultimate secret keeper. He didn't reveal anything, and his associates didn't really reveal much either. And so I think that's one of the reasons why for so many years, pushing the technical mastery of his filmmaking aside, people are still talking about him.
Well, there you have it, kids. Stanley Kubrick is the cinematic version of Jimmy Hoffa. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining me today. Is there any projects that you have coming up that you want to promote here and that my viewers should be looking forward to?
Yeah, I have a book coming out on April 15th and collaborated with many wonderful people on that. Tons of anime super fans, Anitubers, a few filmmakers, and other authors and writers. A few scholars, and I'm super excited to share everyone's hard work with people. It's coming out April 15th. It's called Anime Impact. You can pre-order it at Amazon. It's going to be available at Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, possibly at Chapters if you're in Canada. I had heard from a friend of mine in Canada that their Chapters had said they might have it, so I'm hoping that's going to happen. My short film, Auditorium 6, is going to be at the Horror Avenue Film Festival in Illinois and the Crimson Screen Horror Film Festival in South Carolina. So I'm excited about sharing that with people. And I have another short I'm starting working on this summer. So it's a cool, fun time.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me on my show. It was an immense honor. And I'd like to thank you for watching today. And I hope you liked today's video. And if you did, you can click on the link down below and you can subscribe to my channel to see more movie reviews and movie related things. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching and see you next time.